I'm talking right now, so you need to sit quietly, please. Okay, so I is something new today. We're talking about imaginary numbers, and I is equal to the square root of -1. So imaginary numbers are numbers that were created by humans, and they allow us to do all sorts of cool things in electronics. So they essentially, it creates another plane. So I'm told that that's one of the ways that our cell phones work, is with imaginary numbers. So I is equal to the square root of -1. Up until this point, what have you been told about the square root of a negative number? So you got an answer, and you have square root of a negative. What would you say that the answer is? The answer's wrong. So you'd say no real solution. So real meaning real numbers, and that's still true. There's no real number solution. This is something we created, and it's actually another set of numbers that we'll talk about tomorrow, complex numbers. So this is within the complex numbers. It's not what's called a real number, which is all the other numbers that you know about. Okay? So, but again, the negative is inside the square root. So, what's different here about number 2? You have a negative inside the square root. So what we do when we have that is we're going to rewrite this as square root of -1 times square root 81. Does that make sense? Because -1 times 81 is -81. And then what's the square root of 81? 9. And then what's the square root of -1? I. So we are going to write it to the right of the number, just like if it were a variable. So we'll write our answer as 9. So this is different from yesterday's in that we have a negative inside the square root here on this one. Okay, number 3. What do we do then on that one? This is the same thing as the square root -1 times square root 50, right? And then how do we simplify that square root 50? So we're going to take 50. If you use perfect squares, fantastic. Or you can do prime factors. And so it would be 25 times 2. And then 5 times 5. And so if we simplify just this square root 50, this would be the square root of 2 times 5 times 5. And then how do we simplify that? Bilal, tell us how we simplify it.
So you put a circle around the 2 5s.
Yep.
Then you bring the 2 or wait, not. Never mind.
You said it. You said 5. I thought you did.
Yeah,
5 and then square root 2. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to take this is an I, and it's going to be I times 5 square root 2. And where we're going to put that I is after the 5. So we're going to write it as 5I square root 2. So let me talk about why we don't put it after the square root 2. So if we write 5 square root 2 and then I there, it's really unclear as to whether this is inside the radical or outside the radical. That's inside the square root or outside the square root. So we want to put it after the 5. Does that make sense? Okay, so square root of -80. Am I going too fast? So again, we have the square root of -1 times square root of 80. And then what do we do with that 80? We just leave it?
No.
No. What do we do? We're going to factor it. That's right. We're going to find our prime factors. Or if you do perfect square, largest perfect square, that's great. So I'm going to do 16 times 5. Say we got 16 times 5. And then what goes into 16? 8 and 2, or 4 and 4. So I'm just doing this to make a point. If we did it the prime factors way, then this would be 4 times 4 times 5, because we have a pair. So we don't have to keep going on that. You can, you don't have to, but you have a pair. That's your goal. So then this part is I. And then what does this simplify to here? 4 square root 5. So our answer is 4I square root 5. Does that make sense? Okay, number 5, same idea. Take 150. Let's write it as square root -1 times square root 150. What's a number that goes into 150? 15 and 10? And then 3 and 5? And 5 and 2. So we have the square root of 2 times 3 times 5 times 5. Apollo, can you simplify that for us? Can you simplify this for us, please?
5 times third of 6.
Good. So we're going to take I times 5 square root 6. Write my 5 again. Sometimes they're. And then what would my answer on that be? What would the answer, the final answer be? 5. Where do you put the I? Yes, 5I. And then square root 6. Okay, go ahead and do the track. Seven I root 2. Tedious.
That's what I was going to see.
Look at the worksheet and tell me the
49.
So 7i square root 2 is our answer. Any questions on that? Okay, so number 7. What do we do when there's a number on the outside? What does that mean? Multiply. So we're just going to multiply 8 times square root negative 1 times square root 36. What is the square root of 36? 6. So this is 8 times 6 I, which gives us 48i. Okay, number 8. This is going to be negative 5 times square root negative 1 times square root 75. So Nick, what do we do next?
We want to factor the 75.
Good. Nice. So how do we do that, Nick?
You can do 5 and 15. And 15 or 5 and 15.
Yep. So this gives us square root of 3 times 5 times 5. That simplifies how? On Ace, how does that simplify? Yeah, 5 square root 3. So we have negative 5i times 5 square root 3, which is negative 25i square root 3. So a common mistake on this problem, listen please. The students want to cancel those negatives. Why can't we cancel those negatives? Make it positive. That's right. One is inside. This one is inside here, inside the square root. This one is not. So we cannot do any canceling there. Okay, last one. Pay attention, please. So we're going to start by doing what? So 18, 9 times 2. And if you do perfect squares, fantastic. I just show it this way because more students get it this way. So we have a negative 7 times 3 square root 2, right? Why is there no I in this one? We didn't finish it yet. Why is there no I?
Because the negative's not inside the square.
That's right. So I put this here on purpose. On your worksheet that you get today, you're going to have some on the inside that are positive and some that are negative. So then we do want to simplify this, and this would be negative 21 times the square root of 2. Okay, go ahead and do the U try. Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Damn, how did I get it?
Oh gosh, forgot that one. Like what? Maybe somebody can pass out the worksheets.
Jack wants to do it.
Would you say you're faster slow?
No, you don't.
So I take all of you out. What is in the middle?
Nah.
So you think,